Kia ora and welcome to the Niche Cast. We're from the niche-case.com where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters, and of course if you're up on the newsletter you can also read some Aotearoa sporting matters because our Monday newsletter will be live by the time you're listening to this, watching this. So head on over to the nichecase.substack.com for the newsletter all about Aotearoa sport. You know what we do? We go deep into Aotearoa sport, so deep that we come out with gems like this, which, to be honest, I don't really see a lot of people talking about. I think we might be ahead of the curve on this one, but we've already talked about it. But it's just a double down on the let's call Jasprit Bumrah the best bowler in the world right now.
Well, that depends on who he's playing, though, doesn't it?
It does, because the best bowler in the world. Let's go West Indies. Jasprit Bumrah in Test cricket, he averages 9.2. Sri Lanka, he averages 9. South Africa, he averages 20.7. England, the best cricketing nation in the whole wide world, the Pommies, he averages 22.1. Bangladesh, 12.8. The mighty Australia, Jasprit Bumrah averages 17.4. And if you're using your tardingers and you're listening, all of those averages for Jasprit Bumrah are below 23. Until you get to New Zealand, when Jasprit Bumrah averages 45.4. And this gets deeper because Jasprit Bumrah, he concedes 2.93 RPO against New Zealand, which is not the highest of the nations that Jasprit Bumrah has played against in Test cricket, because that is South Africa, 2.97, but Bumrah averages 20.7 against South Africa. All these other nations, they are below 2.9 RPO for Bumrah. New Zealand, 2.93, and Jasprit Bumrah averages 45.4. I'd also add, because we're getting a lot of Kohli worship by the Aussies love a bit of Kohli, and that's a very strange kind of paradox.
Except when he's shoulder barging the new golden boy.
But that's,
Although even then, I think the fact it was Kohli meant something. Yeah,
well, it
he's the
meant
most
something to the
Australian of all Indians.
it meant something to the Aussies. It didn't mean anything to anyone else. It meant something to the Aussies because they can't decide if they love him or hate him. They love his energy, but he goes overboard. You know, it's just typical Aussie behaviour. But we got Kohli, who averages over 40 against Australia, Bangladesh, England, South Africa, Sri Lanka, West Indies. And the only nation that Virat Kohli averages less than 40 against is New Zealand, where he averages 38.3. Now, that isn't as significant as Jasprit Bumrah, but it is relevant to what you're observing in the cricketing world right now. So we got Virat Kohli, who averages 40 against every other nation except for New Zealand in Test cricket. And we got Bumrah, who averages over 40 against New Zealand with the ball. And also, if we're going deep into stats, these dudes don't play against Pakistan. So obviously, all their stats, all their performances in Test cricket are null and void because they don't play against the nation in Test cricket. How about that? That's how deep we go. Bucking against the trends, bucking against the basic breakdowns. We are here for the Aotearoa propaganda in which they easily dispatch Jasprit Bumrah, and we don't really care about Virat Kohli because the only nation he averages less than 40 against is the big old Aotearoa.
Which stats that when I first heard/realized those kind of blew my brain a little bit. But then tracking it since, I mean, I remember when you said that because you brought the Bumrah one up the first time I heard it was when you told me this, and I thought, well, no, the way you framed it was like we're not really scared of Bumrah, like we don't have that kind of fear factor because he's never done it in the games where we're like emotionally invested like that. And yeah, the more I see him bowling like an absolute fiend against Australia, it just hammers it home the more the times I've played. Like I've never seen him do that against the team that I support. It's kind of crazy. And then Coley, like to be fair with Coley, he kind of sucked against everyone for a couple years there. His like I think his test average over the last was it 4 or 5 years, like a pretty significant period, was kind of like 30, mid 30s or high 30s or something like that, where it's like you're still good, but you're not really in that world class mold alongside guys like Joe Root, Kane Williamson, who continue to score big hundreds. Steve Smith seems to maybe be turning it around a little bit now for the late career resurgence. Although Coley got 100 the other game as well, so
I mean, he still
perhaps it's not too
averages
late.
54 against South Africa, 67 versus Sri Lanka, 45 versus Australia, 48 versus Bangladesh, 42 versus England. Like, he's still good. I don't
Well,
really. The
he
modern
was
twist isn't really relevant here.
well. A lot of those averages are heavy lifting from earlier in his career when he was right up there with alongside anyone. But he probably of the so-called Fab Four, he probably had the shortest the sort of shortest sweet spot in the it's like well peak the shortest peak of his career of those guys. However, he is also the best one day slash T20 batter of those four as well. So, fair enough to Mr. Virat. Just like to see you do it on an overcast day at Hagley Oval
Or against Pakistan.
or against
Virat Kohli,
Pakistan.
to your point, he averages less than 30 in 4 of his last 5 years, but he did average a big old 56 last year in test batting. Just a bit more Bumrah. He's played 5 tests against New Zealand. He's got 9 wickets. He's got 10 wickets in 2 tests versus Sri Lanka, 13 wickets in 2 tests versus West Indies, and he's got 11 wickets versus Bangladesh in 2 tests. So he's got more wickets in less tests against those 3 nations than he does against New Zealand. I don't know. I don't know what it means, but yeah, I'm not scared of Bumrah. I haven't seen Bumrah do that crazy stuff against New Zealand, so I don't believe it. And I haven't seen him do it against Pakistan, so I don't believe it. And that's the type of stuff that we do whip up here at the Niche Cache. There's also another little intro topic I want to throw out there. Is just the young phenoms around Aotearoa. And this is something that is very important for Kiwi sports fans right now, but again, you're not really seeing it discussed this way in the Aotearoa media. Because they're more interested in F1 Drive and they're more interested in whatever else is going on around the world than anything to do with New Zealand. But we do have Mason Clarke making his domestic cricket debut in the Super Smash, which is interesting because he didn't play Plunkett Shield, didn't play Ford Trophy, but the 17-year-old Seamer from Queenstown apparently made his debut in the Super Smash, looked comfy. Not sure how fast he's bowling, but he's bowling fast enough. Definitely 130, bit of outswing. Came up against Chad Bowes in his debut game, then he's coming up against Martin Guptill. And he handled those challenges admirably. What does he have? I think he's got 2 wickets and an average of 20 odd. 2 wickets, 9 RPO, 22.5 and 5 overs for a pretty interesting Otago team. And Mason Clarke, he's 17 years old. He was the youngest member in the Under-19 World Cup that played in South Africa earlier this year. Now he's playing domestic cricket at the same time as Mason Clarke. 17-year-old seamer for Otago. We have Luke Brooke. Is it Brooks or is it Brooke singular?
Brooke.
Brooke-Smith. Luke Brooke-Smith. 16-year-old. Who's already debuted for the Wellington Phoenix, but then he started for the Wellington Phoenix on the weekend. And he looks comfy at the A-League level. And he looks physically, but like obviously if you're a youngster, because the other dude I was thinking about in this realm was Leka Halasima, who was 18 years old when he made his debut against the Bulldogs and casually played middle forward and then centre. I think he also had a few minutes at edge forward in his debut game, but he's just an 18-year-old playing in the middle, out on the edge, making an impact. And I believe he made his New South Wales Cup debut when he was 17 years old. And in rugby league, if you're 17, 18 years old playing reserve grade or above, you've got to have some physical traits, because you're not stepping up to NRL footy as an 18-year-old if you can't handle the physicality. And Leka Halasima can, because I don't know if he's massive, but he's an absolute unit, and he's fast, and he's powerful. He's just a natural baller. So it goes without saying, if you're a youngster stepping up in the NRL or rugby union, you need to have that physicality. It's a little bit more interesting to ponder when you're thinking about cricketers and footballers. Like Mason Clarke, if he's 17 years old and a bowler, he's not being selected to play Super Smash if he's bowling 120 Ks. You know, like there is a baseline that you need to do, and the fact that he's 17 years old being selected in that spot automatically tells you, before you've even seen him bowl, that he's hitting those markers, that he's hitting those baselines. You watch Luke Brooke-Smith, and he seems more physical, more robust than his peers, his 16-year-old peers, his teenage peers who are still at school. What else does Luke Brooke-Smith offer? Because I do think he is a physical specimen. He's a unit for a footballer. He's robust, he's powerful, he's quick enough, he works hard, he's got a big motor. But what are like the footballing traits that Luke Brooke-Smith has, and any other young Phoenix, because there's a lot of Phoenix players. Costa Barbarousa said in an interview after the win over the weekend that if you're a youngster, the best place you want to be is the Wellington Phoenix, because no matter how young you are, you can play for the first team in the A-League. That is the identity, the development pathway that the Phoenix have. So Luke Brooke-Smith or any other youngster that you've seen, 17, 16, maybe even 15-year-olds who have debuted for the Phoenix, although I don't think there are any, what does he offer outside the physicality? Because when you're a youngster making your debut at this level, Mason Clarke, Leka Halasima, those lads, the physicality, the physical traits are basically automatic. Like, that is the mandatory baseline that you have to hit, and then you've got the other things on top. What does Luke Brooke-Smith have on top of that physicality?
Yeah, well, he has physicality in a couple different ways as well. Because he's quick, but he's also strong, like you're saying. And it's like I said last week, he's not strong compared to strong A-League players, because that's a very rugged league, and there's guys 10 years older than him who have been hitting the weights for a long time. Corbin Piper feels like someone who's coming straight into the A-League, and he is strong for an A-League player. Luke Brooke-Smith, though, might not be strong by like the comparisons of the strongest guys in the league, but he's strong for a 16-year-old. He's the strongest 16-year-old I've seen out there shoving dudes around and, you know, holding his own in challenges shoulder to shoulder and stuff. Also noticed at least 3 times in the sort of 60-odd minutes that he's played so far where he's done the same move where he like is drifting to his left and then he chops back the other way to try get a nutmeg with the outside of his right boot, just slicing back through a guy. And I mean, first of all, I like seeing a trademark move like that. That's cool. Second of all, like seeing being willing and also pretty successful with that same move, willing to do it and able to pull it off a few times already, like straight away. There's no fear there. And I think that's a big part of his game is like the mental side of it. When you're seeing the youngest ever Phoenix player out there not looking overawed, not looking like he's trying to play within himself. Like he just looks, to use a word you've already chucked out there, he looked comfy. And that's pretty rare. That in itself is pretty rare. But he's quite used to being like the youngest guy getting opportunities, because he was playing first team football for Cambridge when he'd just turned 15. And then he moved to Hamilton Wanderers, just turned 16, playing first team football in the Northern League. Now he's playing Wellington Phoenix. He's played National League a few games for the Phoenix Reserves. Now he's played A League. Like he's on the accelerator as far as his career goes. But yeah, like skillful, good technique, and then a few times, maybe the most encouraging thing, just apart from that initial comfiness, the next most encouraging thing I saw from him in that game there, the Newcastle Jets win, was there was a couple of times where he was like back in his own half, chipping in with the defensive stuff, and then the Phoenix win the ball and they're trying to work it out of pressure, and he's making clever passes, like he's passing it slightly in front of a guy, like a leading pass to allow them to run onto it and advance the ball, and holding onto it just a little bit more, knowing how much time he's got when guys are pressing against him, and in situations where you can't afford to lose the ball as well. Like he made some really good decisions in those kind of transitional moments, which frankly, like 16-year-olds shouldn't be able to do that. He should be still figuring out. That's the kind of thing that should come with experience. But here's a guy who just has this like innate ability. So I think he, from what I saw from him for the reserves, I wouldn't say there was like I wouldn't say there's like an overwhelming singular aspect to his game that stands out, like Ben Old's dribbling or whatever. Like a few of the other guys who have come through have had this. I think he's just an extremely well-rounded footballer who doesn't really seem to have weaknesses. And those are the kind of things you say about 10-year veterans. Those are not the kind of things you say about a guy 10 minutes into his professional career. So he he got this opportunity where like a lot of people who had been following him were aware. Like he's ticking boxes along the way. The age he was, the minutes he was playing at even just a domestic club level, those aren't normal things. You take notice when a guy's doing that. And I think the hype has not diminished one little bit. It's only accelerated by what we've seen from him in his first 60 minutes of A-League football. This guy's a bit of a special prospect.
And you added Jaden Smith, 17-year-old, who made his debut for the Phoenix earlier this season, to the list of youngest Phoenix debutants. We've also got Gabriel Sloan Rodriguez, who's the same age as Luke Brooke-Smith. So it'd be rude to talk about Luke Brooke-Smith and not talk about Gabriel Sloan Rodriguez, who's also 16 years old and has debuted for...
Well, he's 17 now. He was 16 when he debuted. So I think he's 1 year older than Luke Brooke-Smith, but he's 1 year ahead of him in his career. But yeah, but when you're that young, it doesn't make a difference.
Roger that.
Which, by the way, means that 3 of the Phoenix's youngest ever debutants have gotten those debuts within the last 10 months. Jaden Smith in week 1, Luke Brooke-Smith 2 weeks ago, and Gabe Sloan Rodriguez, I think, last March or something like that.
There's a lot of youngsters in women's cricket. A lot of 18, 19 years old. And I just checking, how old's young Anna Browning, who is playing for the Otago Sparks? She's now 21, so this doesn't apply to her. But you've got someone like Eve Woland for Northern Districts. She's 18 years old, playing Super Smash right now. But there's a whole bunch of other ones that I will keep learning about in women's cricket. Don't have those type of youngsters in women's rugby league. They seem to mature at a bit of a later age. Who are some other young prodigies that you've got on your side of the beat? And I'm going to set you up because one of them just seemed to have scored a bicycle kick.
Yep, that'd be Mr. Tyler Bindon. I'll work my way up to him because I think he's kind of at the top of the tree. Whereas like there's a few others, we've talked about Luke Brooke-Smith coming through. There's a couple others I would mention, like domestic football in terms of yet to get to the professional realms. Stipe Jukic on the men's side, most recent player of the day in the last Chatham Cup final. Ella Jerez, player of the day, and scored the match winner in the 2023 as a 15-year-old. 2023 Kate Shepherd Cup final. She's with the Wellington Phoenix, getting ready to make a debut at some stage this season. I expect that'll probably happen based on her National League stuff. She was pretty outstanding, but even just like elsewhere in the National League, Pia Vlock superb in the National League Women's Grand Final for Auckland United. Scored a brilliant goal and was the best player on the park. Zoe Benson as well, playing for Eastern Suburbs. She's, I think, 17 or 18 now. I think just turning 18, and the last 2 years in a row, she's been either the leader or tied leader for assists in the National League. So there's some pretty superb talent going around there. But yeah, as far as when we get to the up to the international stuff, we might still count Millie Clegg. She's only about, I think she's 19 now. She might almost still count for this. 2 years ago, she absolutely would have. Uh, that's the same age as Tyler Bindon is as well. So you've got Millie Clegg, one of the youngest players to get minutes last season during the NWSL, and one of very few international players under the age of 20 to have played in the NWSL in recent years, which was like a frustrating thing throughout the season, waiting for her to get opportunities. She's sitting on the bench all the time. Why aren't they subbing her on? Blah, blah, blah. But when you actually look at how rare it is for a player her age from outside of America, we're in this league where there are limited international spots. So you're generally saving those ones for players who are going to come in and be immediate impactors amongst your best players. So that's rare territory there, let alone the fact that Millie Clegg, not so long ago, played and scored at an under-17 World Cup, played and scored at an under-20 World Cup, and then got selected within 12 months of each other for the Senior World Cup as well, where she didn't play, therefore she didn't score. But she has since scored for the Football Ferns, so she's very much set up to be like... It won't be too long before she's one of the Ferns' very best players. At the moment, she's still just on the very end of that prodigy territory, as is Tyler Bindon, because Tyler Bindon has had now a year and a half of this with Reading, where he's just like, he plays every week. He's incredibly reliable, incredibly consistent, does a great job of what they ask him to do for a team that off the pitch is in absolute turmoil. And because they're in such turmoil, they're very likely to have to sell players because well, basically every window that comes around. It was when they had to sell one of their top defenders 12 months ago in the January transfer window that Tyler Bindon really broke through into the team. He'd been playing in and out, sometimes a little bit on the right back, and he'd been getting minutes, which is notable, but it had been a little bit more up and down. Whereas once he got that locked on spot after they sold their other centre back, brought him in and said, you're starting every week now. He's been kind of on a 12-month heat streak ever since then. And that that has culminated in what may have been his last appearance for Reading Football Club, where he scored a bicycle kick for the winner against Mansfield Town, a Mansfield Town team that didn't have Ben Waine anywhere to be seen. So I don't know what's up with that. Perhaps he's injured. Maybe he just came home for Christmas. Who knows? But Tyler Bindon, well, we'll see what happens there, because they won't want to sell a guy who's been maybe their best player this season. Or at least one of them, he was voted their second best player last season at the club awards, and he's right up there in the same territory. He is incredibly assured and confident for a player of his age. No teenager played more minutes in England's League One, which, like the A-League, very rugged league, very physical league, very difficult for young players to hang on like that. No player no player under the age of 20 played more minutes last season in that division than Tyler Bindon. No player under the age of 20 has played more minutes this season than Tyler Bindon, although he is going to turn 20 soon, so we might have to set that by years rather than by under 20s thing, because I think he does have a birthday coming up in a month or two. But these are again, these are very rare things for a player his age to be doing. And if Reading need to sell someone, he is their most saleable asset. He is the guy who could bring in the most money and therefore hopefully avoid them having to make maximum transfers. His old coach recently left for Hull City in the Championship, so there's an obvious possible destination. But at least 3 or 4 other clubs in the English Championship have been linked with him. So wouldn't be surprised if within a month he's shooting up a division and playing at a higher level. And frankly, the way he's been going for Reading, he is ready for it. So, and is a locked-on member of every all-white squad already at this point as well, and probably, what is he? First 11 status, I'm not sure. Well, I think the centre back rotation is still a little bit up in the air when you got Finn Surman and Michael Boxall and Nando Peinecker and Tyler Bindon, who've all been playing very well over the last 12 months. So uh, we won't make proclamations about starting teams, but he's in every single squad, and that's not going to change for a long time.
And in these squads, he's the youngest. Is he the youngest or what in these squads?
Very likely. Yeah, probably. He must be. He doesn't feel like it. Like I have to sort of double check in my head because it doesn't sound like it should be right because he's already played about 10 times and he's just a regular squad member. But yeah, he probably is still the youngest player in these squads. It's pretty hard to make the national team at that age.
This is slightly different because Casey McLean was born and raised in Australia, but he also just made his debut for the New Zealand Kiwis this year as an 18-year-old. So he deserves a mention because if we're talking about youngest national team members, he's there. And Tyler Bindon's there. Millie Clegg's there. And don't really have anyone in the cricket bracket right now. Because all those dudes, like, they're younger, but they're 21, 22. Like, even Bevan Jacobs, I think, is 22 years old at the moment. So, shout out to
I
all
could
the...
chuck in some basketball names who fit the same bill, though.
Oh,
Bit of Julius Halafenor, Oscar Goodman, Hayden Jones has played a little bit of Tall Blacks, getting into like Bailey Flavel, Payless Hockeyunga on the tall fin side. There's there's actually quite a long list of players who've got young debuts for those teams, even just in recent months.
beauty. Any other intro stuff? Who cares? But we do need to do some mindfulness, and I'm curious, as always, what you got from mindfulness. But I was meditating on this one that I comes from yours truly. I created it.
Self-proclaimed mindfulness. I like it.
Yes. To be peaceful or to be at peace, you must do peaceful things.
When I was looking through possibilities for what mindfulness wanted to pick earlier, and I can't remember at all what the quote was, but there was one that was very similar to that, which was like action and then outcome kind of thing, like just doing things with intent and getting your yeah, finding your peace that way by putting yourself in peaceful situations by doing peaceful things, which is actually kind of the opposite, but also in a yin yang kind of as above, so below kind of way. The opposite, but feels also exactly the same as the one I ended up writing down, which is a George Saunders quote that goes, smile first, then speak.
Nice.
Well played.
Um, yeah, that's a good one. Smile first, then speak. It's smile. You can never stop smiling. Like that's a good one. I was locked and loaded to explain my peaceful one, but the
Well, go ahead because I think they're quite similar in that they both speak to the relationship between uh actions and mindsets and outcomes.
because a lot of us here and now, we want to be at peace. We want to be peaceful. But if you're like me, you're looking for the peace. You're trying to be peaceful, but nothing you're doing is actually, you're not doing anything that is actually peaceful to help you generate the peace. And if we're trying to generate the peace, crikey Jack, you got to do some peaceful things because you're countering the opposite energy. You're countering the chaos. So you can't be doing nothing with the chaotic energy and be like, oh, trying to be peaceful. Then you're trying to be peaceful from a space of chaos. But you got to at least try a little bit to do something peaceful to at least balance out the chaotic energy. And then maybe day by day, step by step, you're working towards the peace. How about that?
Well, it's like if you're thirsty, you go have a drink of water, right? It's not if you're thirsty, you go and eat hot wings. If you're thirsty, you get water. Like that's the thing that feeds the overcoming the thirst, whatever it's the thing that quenches the thirst. Same as like if you're trying to be peaceful, you don't yeah, you don't feed into the chaotic energy that you're trying to avoid. How are you going to avoid it by doing the thing that you're trying not to do? And yeah, if you yeah, something about smiling and talking as well. Wrap it all out. Like, yeah, I think there's two different angles on that. One is like you do the thing and then you get the other outcome, and then the other one is like you put yourself in the mind frame and then you get the outcome kind of thing. Like you smile first, you put yourself in a smiling mood, and then you speak, and then you're going to be more considered, and then you're going to be more like, well, going to be a little bit more peaceful as well, aren't you? And yeah, we're sort of looking at things from one side or the other, but in the middle, both of those things involve trying to get to an outcome that is healthy, basically. And it's kind of it's almost like a cheat code how much control we have over those things when we don't just go with the flow, which the flow often is just that chaotic energy around you. You can like step back and act with a little bit more intention, and what do you know? Voila.
Yeah, I feel like using too many buzzwords there, like outcome, intentions,
Yeah, I
and
know.
all that
I
stuff.
so
Like, just seems a bit icky, but it's all good because Wellington Phoenix fans, Auckland FC fans, they didn't need your mindfulness because the football got them smiling. Big wins. Wellington Phoenix 2-1 over the Newcastle Jets. Auckland FC away to Central Coast Mariners, big old 4-1 victory, and we swing back around. I think the Wellington Phoenix, they have a bye, and Auckland FC are playing Wednesday, 1st of January. They are at home, Mount Smart Stadium, against Melbourne Victory. Obviously, big wins, bounce back wins for both teams that tell us. The White Ferns told us about their regular programming, their status quo. Yeah, I still believe the Blackcaps in Test cricket told us about their regular programming status quo. These teams inform us about what their regular levels are. And Auckland FC, Wellington Phoenix, they both informed us of their regular levels with nice victories. Not necessarily easy mahi victories. They still had to work hard. They still had few mishaps, things going against them, but they got wins and they scored lots of goals. For me, the biggest storyline out of these games, Tim Paine, who Coach Chiefy said someone stood on the back of his ankle at training, which to me is like the worst thing about football. But that just sounds terrible because like someone's just chopping at your ankles with like some sort of studs on, and that just sounds absolutely diabolical. But then it was like we were thinking it was fractured. So not only do you have any scratches, grazes, any scars, any like blood drawn from someone chopping at your ankle, but you might have a fractured ankle. And Tim Paine was ruled out. But you know what Tim Paine does? He makes bangers. He shows up. He performs. And that's what Tim Paine did for the Wellington Phoenix at right back. But then, not only is he actually playing, but I'm watching deep into that game for the Wellington Phoenix because they were only winning 2-1. Newcastle Jets made a nice little comeback. Who are the dudes who are playing with the most energy at the end of that game? One is Costa Barbarouses, who is the opposite of these young... Well, he was a young phenom, but now he's not a young phenom. Now he's just the best player in the A-League as a senior pro.
Luke Brooke-Smith wasn't even born when Costa Barbarouses made his Phoenix debut. And Costa Barbarouses was at that time the youngest ever Phoenix player.
So Costa Barbarouses is chasing blokes down 100% speed in the final minutes. Who else is doing that? Tim Paine, who was ruled out of the game 24 hours earlier. Big up Tim Paine for his toughness. Toughest football player from New Zealand. To be honest, with the Neil Wagner retirement, I'm going Tim Paine, toughest Kiwi athlete right now.
Well, I'm not going to argue that point. In fact, I think the Tim Paine Neil Wagner comparison is a pretty appropriate one, come to think of it. Not only for the like battling through foot issue, for um, you know, commanding match-winning performance straight after. There's a direct one, but it's just I think in general those are two very hearty kind of carry the team on their back kind of players, just in and how they always played regardless, and turning up each week with the same intensity and all that good stuff. It's yeah, that's the T-Pain formula. And this, like, do you remember before the first Derby game when Alex Rufer was ruled out injured, and then he ended up playing anyway? And not only did he play, he started. Not only did he start, he played the entire game. And not only did he play the entire game, he was one of the best players on the park, even though the Phoenix did lose that game with just, this one of those very, very similarly courageous effort to what we saw from Tim Paine there in that Newcastle Jets game, in very similar circumstances, and that he'd been ruled out and then he ended up playing and doing the full game and been awesome. And there's there might be a pattern emerging here with the Phoenix medical staff, although to be fair to the Phoenix medical staff, they've been very busy this season, so an oversight here or there wouldn't could be excused.
The T-Pain one it just seems completely different to the Phoenix to the Rufer one. The Rufer one seems like, yeah, I can see how that might have been derby gamesmanship, but Tim Paine in this game, first of all, it's not a derby, so the derby antics, there's no need for derby antics. But second of all, Chiefy after the game, he said the best thing about that game and the thing he loved the most was Tim Paine responding to his injury. And he talked about how bad it was when he was ruled out. So I think this is slightly different, but that's just me nitpicking your takes.
Well, it's a courageous effort to say, but I think in both of those cases, there's no doubt they were injured, because Rufer got injured during the previous game, so we saw him get hurt. Like, we knew that was a real thing, and Paine, like you say, it was explained prior to the game what the extent of the knock was there, and what their sort of immediate fears might have been. As it happened, I think, I don't know, I think there's no two players in that Phoenix squad who you'd more anticipate being able to shrug off an injury through just sheer perseverance and determination and whatever than Tim Paine and Alex Rufer. That's why those two are the leaders in the team. Is there a third? Who's the third one?
Come on now.
Well, I know it's not Micah Rojas because he's been injured all season.
No, but it's his little buddy up top. Costa Barbarouses is an absolute beast.
Yeah, okay. In a different manner, I couldn't see him doing what he does with like a hobbled ankle, because he relies a fair bit on his movement. But in a different way, I think, yeah, okay. As far as the leadership crew goes, though, yeah, that's the big three.
That's the key point. Those dudes set the tone for the effort and desire to play for the Wellington Phoenix. All three are from Aotearoa. Rufer and Paine, I think, are from Auckland. Costa Barbarouses, local Wellingtonian.
Rufer from Palmerston North.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
What do you know?
Same region then. It's good stuff. So there's only one Aucklander. Even better. But that is the, for lack of a better term, I'm going to chuck it up again, the holy trinity of Wellington Phoenix mana is evident in those players. You were Costa Barbarouses' biggest fan last season. Like, you've been his biggest fan for his whole career, to be honest. But last season, you're big up in Costa a lot. This season, the consistent effort and energy he plays with. How old is he now? He must be 35, 36, 34?
Yeah, 34th, turning 35, I think.
And he leads the Wellington Phoenix for fizz. He is right there with T-Paine for energy. Those dudes last a long time in the games. And it's like this battle, Wellington Phoenix, I think they were the better team. They get 2-0 up, I believe. Then Newcastle Jets come back. Last 10 minutes, they get the shirts off, but It's that tricky spot where they get their shirts off, but there's only one goal in it. And you can kind of sense that the shirts might need to get back on at some point because the opposition's coming back in the game. But if I got Costa Barbarouses, Alex Rufer, and Tim Paine playing those last 15 minutes, including extra time, or whatever, I'm confident that the Wellington Phoenix are going to win because those three dudes, they're playing with the same energy in the 92nd minute as they are in the second minute. And if you're looking for a development program, having the youngsters come up behind these three dudes is impeccable.
Yeah, and I think the most encouraging part of that victory against Newcastle was the way in which it resembled the types of wins they got a lot of last season, where like I think the Phoenix were the better team in this game, but they weren't the better team to the extent where it was a clear and easy kind of 3-0 victory or anything like that. It was they had to hang on there at the end, and they had to hang on in a lot of games last season. I think 10 of their 15 wins last season came by a single goal margins. And you remember when they were first kind of establishing themselves as a team that was going to be up near the top of the table last season, when people thought perhaps it would be the opposite because of the amount of players that they've lost, which, by the way, is no different this season. It's like they've 5 of their starters from their elimination final 2 years ago left straight away, and 5 starters from the preliminary final second leg defeat to Melbourne victory last season have left. So they've kind of had the same hit to their starting lineup on both occasions. So perhaps maybe there's some of their I was going to say some of the wobbles this season, but really outside of the 3-game losing streak they've just had, their only other loss was to Auckland FC the first time they played. So it's not been, they've had a wobble recently, but it's not been an up and down season. They've been pretty good for most of the campaign. But yeah, perhaps that's something to keep in mind a little bit, as they are kind of rebuilding on the fly a bit in the way that they did last season, but they did last season with Finn Sermon ready to go and Alex Paulson ready to go and Ben Old ready to go. These guys who had already spent a couple of years around the first team picture getting ready. Whereas like Matt Sheridan had a bit of last season. Nathan Walker, Luke Brooke-Smith have had no senior A-League football prior to this season. Some of those type of situations where, yeah, perhaps the youngsters coming through this year are a little fresher than the ones there were last year. But that's just how it goes. Some years you've got guys who have been waiting atop the queue, ready for their turn, and other years you just don't. You start again. So, but that's the thing to consider about how they've been a little bit wobbly, perhaps in recent weeks. Is yeah, they're rebuilding, and they've got a few new imports in there as well. And the more they play, the less wobbly they will get. So it makes sense that they weren't going to come in like all guns blazing to start the season, but they do still feel like a team that's going to continue to grow into things, and that's why this win was very encouraging, because it felt like it was a reclamation of their identity from last season, where they didn't create an abundance of chances, but they took 2 very well taken, in this case, 2 supremely well taken goals. Costa Barbarouses from almost halfway, and Paulo Retre with a banger in the bottom corner as well from some second phase stuff. So 2, yeah, really well taken goals. So which, yeah, they didn't create a whole lot outside of that. As if they had, they might have been able to run away with the game. They didn't, but they weren't that type of team last season either, and they were able to win these games because if you scored 1 or 2, your defense is probably good enough to shut things out. And there were frisky moments in there when Newcastle pulled a goal back, but you also saw the Phoenix, like after they conceded, I don't think there was another like major clear chance. Just a couple good goalkeeping moments from Josh Oluwayemi in the latter stages, but not really like saves that no one expected him to make. It was more like just being a good commanding keeper, good in the air and that kind of stuff, and making the saves that are expected of him. So good from him, but it felt like the type of win that this team was able to grind out a lot last season. And so to see them doing that now with a 50% rebuilt team, arguably more than 50%, It's pretty encouraging because there's some continuity right there. That's the Phoenix identity that served them so well last season. Getting to see a bit of reflection of that again here. Not, I won't say quite for the first time, but maybe for the most emphatic time this season, and at a moment where they really, really, really needed those 3 points because they just lost 3 games in a row.
I remember you talking about Lachlan Bayliss. Is
Hmm.
he New Zealand adjacent?
He went to the Olympics with the New Zealand squad. He is, I think, born and raised in Australia, and he was called up to an Olympic qualifying squad, and then quickly withdrew, which made you think, well, maybe you're genuinely injured, or maybe you're just not quite sure which nation you're trying to represent. But he did go to the Olympics with the New Zealand team. He has had a pretty good season so far with the Newcastle Jets. Scored a very good goal a couple of weeks ago. If it weren't for injury, he might have had more of a breakout season last year as well with the Jets. He sort of started the season, got some good minutes, good opportunities, playing quite well. Then he was injured for a lot of the middle of it, came back and did some nice things towards the end. But yeah, this season seems to be the one where he's been able to be a little bit more consistent about what he does. Attacking midfielder definitely has a bit of a creative eye about him. I wouldn't say he's pushing all white selection or anything right now. I think we've got better players in those areas, but it's nice to have a little bit of depth. And yes, he is at least on the radar, because remember Darren Baisley coached that under 23s team at the Olympics as well. So he's worked specifically with a guy like Lachlan Bayliss. And we have seen since those Olympics, Liam Gillian was a part of that team as well, and he's since made an All Whites debut on the back of his form in the A League. Which, by the way, what are we, 9 games into the season now? Got his first assist on the weekend. So it's something I mentioned. I've been tracking a little bit. I've been keeping an eye on this. Like, I love the Liam Gillian hype. I've been talking about him since his Auckland City days, about this as a guy who could play professional football. He's a guy who could represent his country. Very good, very talented player. But like, that did come quite quick, the All Whites call up. And it was a little bit of a like, yeah, but just there's a bit of end product that we're not seeing yet from him. We're seeing some sort of messy decisions, maybe with that last shot, that last cross, kind of that, that territory. And yeah, nice to see him get a little assist. I think it was for the Brimmer goal where he sort of recycled the ball, laid it back, and then Brimmer whipped it outside of the boot on the half volley bottom corner. Takes some of that. So yeah, good from Liam Gillian, and maybe Lachlan Bayliss will follow his pathway into the All Whites someday. Who knows? Apparently, they're saying on the commentary, the guy is it Gibson, who scored the goal for the Jets, also has a Kiwi mother, which is the first I've ever heard of that. But that would make him always eligible potentially. I think he's scored 3 goals this season for Newcastle. So, I mean, you can never have too many options, right? The worst you can do is just not pick them. So it's good to have available players. I suspect in the A League there's probably quite a few Australian players who are secretly eligible for New Zealand and we just don't know about.
I do agree with Gillian, because I don't think he'd work well with Chris Wood. Chris Wood, who scored another goal in the Premier League, so shout out to him. But I don't think he'd work well with Chris Wood right now, because he's not whipping in the crosses.
No,
If Gillian gets the ball
no.
on the flanks out wide, he's not whipping in the cross, but he's gonna dribble. He's gonna create something. It's not just I don't think it's the most efficient thing that he's going to create. He's not going to whip in a cross to create a chance in front of goal. He might create another chance in a different way, but I'm like, that's a skill set, that's a experience that will come to him. But I don't think it really matters for Auckland FC right now, because I mean, Steve Corican knows the players. He coaches the team. He knows the skills involved, and I'm not convinced. Well, first of all, I find it insane that a lot of people just know better than the coach. Like, it's a very American thing where they just know the sport, the game better than the coach. And I think it would be rude for me and you and us here at the Niche Cage to come on and just criticize coaching decisions all the time, as they do in a lot of other sporting discussions, because these guys are the coach. Their job is to coach the team. Part of coaching the team is being there at training and being there the whole time with the players, and also creating a game plan. So in this instance, the coach, Steve Corica, might be telling Gillian, mate, you don't need to cross.
Yeah, and we have no way of knowing that if he is. So there's no way we can sit here and criticize intentions that we didn't know, we didn't have any clue about.
And there's a lot of other good players like Guillermo Mai, very funky creator in the middle of the field. You got Bumrah, who's very creative in the middle of the field, scored a banger of a goal. You've got Moreno, who's very good at delivering crosses, creating from wide. Rogerson's more of a dribbler, but he can deliver the crosses. Like, it seems like Auckland FC have a style of football and a coaching structure and maybe instructions to the players where none of that Gillian stuff really matters, because he's still impacting games and they are still winning games without something that a basic perspective like mine might be looking at, oh, that might have been a good time to whip in across to Chris Wood, but you didn't, and the chance is gone now. Well, maybe I don't know anything, and maybe the players and the coaches know more than me, but I do want to just bring this up. A lot of cool names here in the Wellington Phoenix and Auckland FC team list. Let's go Oscar Takoda Van Hedem. We obviously know Marco Rodrigo Rojas Wellen. We got Konstantinos Barbarousis. We got Alex Arthur Rufa. Finn Nahina Roaconchi. We got Timothy John Paine. That's a good one. But we've also got Nando Zen Peineke.
Yes.
That would only be better.
Something absolutely amazing? Guess what Joe Bell's middle name is, or one of Joe Bell's middle names?
Talofa.
Zen.
A couple of Zens
there's,
in Kiwi
There's two
football.
guys in the Always who have a middle name Zen.
The only thing better would have been Nandosh Zen Peineke. Shout out to the Aotearoa Vitamin Party. Thomas Jefferson Smith, who played 90 minutes. I thought, like everyone was saying, Tommy Smith was too slow. He's too old to be playing for Auckland FC. I don't know if he played. That's not a fact. I don't know. I'm not a TVNZ cricket commentator speaking as if everything is a fact. I do not know that Tommy Smith played 90 minutes for Auckland FC. Maybe you can confirm or deny. He did. Well, that's Steve Corica. Had no issues chucking Tommy Smith in there. We got Cameron Drew Naru Howison. Drew Naru. That's a... We got Nader. Now, it's not spelt Stephen, but it Stiven. Nader Steven Moreno Betancourt. We got Logan Tipene Rogerson. These names, fantastic. But Auckland FC, they did have a big win. 4-1. A 4-win win over Central Coast Mariners. And I am consistently impressed with Zen Peineke and Hiroki Sakai. Shout out to Smith. I thought Smith held it down. He played his role. Good passing, good positioning. That was solid from him. But without Dan Hall, Zen Peineke is stepping up big time. I'm loving what he does. I think he's the boss of the team. And he lets, like, his presence on the field is felt in that regard. But then you've also got Sakai, and this is something I'm pondering with Auckland FC, because you compare it to Wellington Phoenix, direct comparison. Tim Paine, what does he do? Up and back, down the sideline. And he does it after being ruled out. But he just bursts up and down the sideline for 90 minutes. What does Sam Sutton do? Bursts up and down the left-hand sideline, up, back and forth. Francis de Vries and Hiroki Sakai, they aren't necessarily going all the way up and all the way back and doing it over and over again. They're not making those sprints. So it's a bit different. But Sakai and De Vries, now obviously Sakai does it like 9 out of 10 class. De Vries is a bit more 7.5 levels of class. But when the ball gets to Sakai and he's playing a right back, maybe the right side defender in a back three, no matter what's happening, he's going to make a good pass. And I think it's something really important in football, because how many times, so we're playing out from the back, the ball eventually, like, often gets to the left back or the right back, and they are up against the sideline. They got a dude in front of them. They got all their passes that they can make. The only pass that isn't marked by an opposition player is going backwards. It's a really tough spot to be in on the left side of defense or the right side of defense, because all your passes are basically telegraphed. But Sakai always makes the right pass. De Vries usually makes the right pass. They aren't as fast and they don't have quite the work rate of Tim Paine or Sam Sutton, but their positioning is always excellent, and their passing, their distribution is fantastic. And I think that is a key difference between the two teams. I was impressed with the Wellington Phoenix. Like, their midfield trio is catching my eye. Rufa, Paulo Retre, and Nagasawa. Is that the...
That's the one, Kazuki Nagasawa.
Nagasawa. Like, that midfield trio is pretty impressive for me. I think Auckland FC's got a similar midfield, similar attacking players to some extent, just with a bit more youth in the Phoenix lineup. But the main difference is how those two wide defenders play. Because Sakai, with his limited options, it's always a precise, accurate, powerful pass that flows into another attacking motion. I think De Vries is... he's not in the same class as Hiroki Sakai, but he does similar stuff in terms of, he's not bursting up and down the flank, but he's always there if he's needed. But his left foot passing game is precise and accurate and powerful.
And you know what else he does a lot of? He crosses the ball, which on that left-hand side means that Liam Gillian doesn't have to, because there's still crosses coming in from those areas. It's coming in from a little bit deeper from the fullback, who hits the ball very sweetly. So there you go. And therefore Gillian's often tasked with being that guy to sort of carry the ball forward on the counter attack and create things through those methods, which he's very good at. I was surprised though, just getting back to his sort of like the end product stuff, that's maybe the icing on the cake that's been missing from what everyone can see is otherwise some very good performances from Liam Gillian, just settling straight into professional football like that. I guess maybe the Auckland City background, even though he's only there for a couple of years, but that's probably as close to getting you set for professional football as you can get domestically in this country, at least. Where last week when Neda Moreno comes into the starting lineup, Moreno goes on left wing and Gillian swaps to the right wing. I thought that was quite a smart idea. I would have liked to see that a fair bit more, where it means that Gillian as a right footer is on the right edge, where he's probably being drawn into more crossing situations rather than cutting in and shooting as he would do a bit more on the left, where his shooting, even though he's scored bundles of goals for Auckland City, so he's good enough to score from those situations, but he's also good enough to play on either flank. I wouldn't have minded to see him at the time where he's maybe struggling with the end product, to put him on the right where it's a little bit more singular focus on setting up, but they were terrible last week, so perhaps that was part of it. Was Corica, like we were saying before, about we don't know the instructions, we don't know what the coach is looking for, and therefore what he sees. Or there might have well have been something in that where just the build-up wasn't there because, I don't know, want to protect that De Vries and Gillian link or on the left or something like that. But you think of how often Gillian carries the ball in transition, that's probably part of that. He's getting into those situations maybe largely thanks to the combination with De Vries, who knows how to get the ball to him. So whereas Sakai does play a little bit different. But yeah, I thought Sakai was spectacular in the Central Coast one. He's so good. It's like you're saying, he always makes the right pass, but he just always, that's within the wider scheme of, he always just does the right thing, full stop. He's so he's just like a step above. His brain's working quicker than anyone else. He just reads the game so well. And I think if this game proved one thing above all else, it's that he needs to be the right back. He can't be playing at centre back because the couple games he played at centre back, they weren't very good. They conceded a bunch of goals. Couple games, he goes straight back to right back, and he scores himself within a pretty what ended up being a pretty dominant performance. They scored the early goal, they conceded immediately afterwards. You're thinking, oh, there's a little bit of a this could be another bit of one of them mentality tests after they got found out pretty badly last week with just not turning up with the right attitude or whatever. Well, the attitude was there to see as they quickly responded, scored a couple more goals before halftime. Rogerson finishes one off at the bench at the back post, similar to his first goal actually for Auckland FC later on to give them a more commanding win. Maybe a more commanding win than the flow of the game suggested, because I think Central Coast, especially in the second half, were quite well on top of that game, but Auckland FC defended very well. Like I was saying about the Phoenix, they didn't have Tommy Smith to bring on off the bench, but Tommy Smith was already out there, so that's fine. He did a good job. I think Tommy Smith was solid, but I think Sakai and Paine, were fantastic in that game, and some good stuff from Alex Paulson in there as well. And that's how you keep a team out like that and get yourself a goal against the run of play to seal the deal. And there you go, back to winning ways there for Auckland FC, who remain first. But yeah, they might need to sign another centre back in order to fill things out, because they kind of don't have another option there. Like, there wasn't a centre back on the bench to bring off with Tommy Smith starting. I think Smith did enough to suggest, well, you might as well just keep starting him. If they played well, they won pretty handily in this game, and Sakai was fantastic in his natural position of right back. No need to mess with that. I mean, there was a similar situation what you saw with the Phoenix, actually, because I was wondering when I saw the team sheet and they picked two right backs with Sheridan and Paine both in there. I'm wondering, well, if Paine's been struggling with injury, maybe they won't ask him to do the up and down the sideline runs all day. Maybe they'll just put him at centre back and have Sheridan do that stuff. But that's not what happened. Sheridan played right centre back in the back four. Paine did all the stuff he normally does. And when you're seeing him doing all the stuff he normally does, you're thinking, well, yeah, of course. Like, why mess with the formula? He's one of your key players. If you think he's fit enough to start, you have to back that he's fit enough to make all those, to do 90 minutes of running. And he was, and he did. And Matt Sheridan actually played quite an excellent game, I thought, as a centre back and a back four. We've seen him as a centre back and a back three a few times. Seen him as a right back, seen him as a right wing back, even seen him as a right midfielder on one occasion. And here's another little positional bingo. He's played every position on the right side now for the Phoenix already. He's actually, though, I think it sounds weird when you say that about a right back, but I think if people understand he was actually a midfielder for the reserve team, he's only really been a right back the last couple of years, because he was a midfielder at a time when, like, Dan Mackay was still there, and Finn Conchi was one of the key players for the reserve. So it was like, you can play off the bench as a midfielder, or you can start games as a right back. So he started games as a right back, ended up getting a Phoenix contract, a scholarship contract on the back of that, which he's now turned into a full contract. And sweet as, he's apparently just Mr. Versatility. I don't actually think we'll see a lot of him at right back moving forward, because Tim Paine, is not only locked onto that position now, but has signed a contract extension for the next several years, so he's not going anywhere. They also gave Xuan Loke, the current captain of the reserves team, he's got a scholarship contract now. So he's a fullback, predominantly a right back, but can play left back as well. So we've also seen, I think, Corbin Piper get a little bit of just a little bit of time at right back. I think he came off the bench and played right back in one game, but he's also played a lot of that right centre back duty as well. So
wasn't he playing on the left, like left midfield?
Yeah,
or something?
well, Corbin Piper's has got something in common with Matt Sheridan there, because they subbed him on in place of Luke Brooke-Smith to play as a left winger. And I'm thinking, well, that'll be a positional change. Like, maybe go into a four in the midfield. No, it wasn't. There was just a straight swap, and they just wanted a more defensive, rugged option there. And also, I think with Luke Brooke-Smith, it's like, you can ask an injured Tim Paine to come in and play 90 minutes, because Tim Paine knows exactly how to play 90 minutes. Luke Brooke-Smith doesn't have that conditioning at the A-League level, so you give him a half, and then you protect him. Don't let him run out. Like, don't let him stay out there for so long that he's exhausted and becomes a bit of a hassle for the team to deal with. Like, get a good solid half out of him, sub him off. Corbin Piper does the rest. That's what happened. That's how it worked. So yeah, they're interesting little defensive shuffles for both of the Kiwi men's A-League teams there, but I think defensive shuffles that worked pretty well because they won both those games. And yeah, I don't think we should see Hiroki Sakai playing centre back again in any time soon. And if that is the case, perhaps they might need to find another defender. I did mention last week how they cut loose old Joey Champness, which suggests that perhaps they're clearing. I think it sounds like there was a bit of a falling out there, so it was a very much a mutual. We don't actually want you in our squad anymore, but um, that does clear a bit of room for them to potentially bring in another defender just for cover. So that's an option they might have, at least just to fill out some depth until Dan Hall comes back from injury. But that that back four did pretty well in that game against Central Coast. Central Coast, they've had their own wobbles this season, similar to the Phoenix, in that they were good, so therefore they sell some players, then they're good again, and therefore they sell some more players. You win back-to-back championships. There's plenty of players that are worth selling, and they're rebuilding a little bit like that, but they're still a dangerous team. And Auckland FC were especially getting the job done nice and early. We talked about how often they score late goals. Here it was 3 goals in the first half to set up the victory. So yeah, a great response from them. Like a genuinely great response from what was a terrible performance last week to get an away win like that. Tricky conditions against a good team. There's plenty to like about that. Plenty to like about both of those victories.
It was the flip side of last weekend where the Wellington Phoenix women were the only team to get a win. This time they
Yeah.
were the only team to lose, so that was a bummer. They lost 2-1 in the Women's A-League. Is there anything there, or is there anything, because I think there's a steady flow of football in England over this period of time. What tickles your fancy from the world of football involving Aotearoa?
Well, the women's Phoenix loss 2-1 to Melbourne City, that does snap their 3-game winning streak. So that's a little bit annoying. But they were away against the best team in the competition so far. And they were leading 1-0 at halftime. There was a defensive error. The goalkeeper passed it straight to Grace Jale. Grace Jale wasn't able to score, but she got a powerful enough shot that it was parried to Olivia Ferguson, who tapped it home 1-0, sweet as. They spent most of the game defending, but they held on to that lead, especially in the second half when City brought on Mariana Speckmeyer, ex-Phoenix striker, among a couple others, as a bit of a I think they made a triple change after 55 minutes to try get into it, and they really did take control after that and scored. There was an own goal to equalize. They were very quickly scored again to take the lead. It was around 65, 66 minutes that the 2 goals went in. So you're thinking then maybe they'll run away with it. Like, it's, to be fair, a better reflection of the game that Melbourne City are ahead at that point. But Emma Main comes off the bench for Wellington Phoenix, sparks a few things for them. They actually had quite a few chances. In fact, all their best chances came after they were 2-1 down. So considering that the goal they scored was a bit of a defensive giveaway. So there was some nice stuff in there. It's a frustrating defeat, but frustrating in a way where it felt like it's frustrating because not because they played badly. It was frustrating because they played quite well and might well have taken something from that game, might easily have gotten a 2-2 draw. So, and getting impact off the bench as well from someone like Emma Main is good stuff too. That's helpful. They've shuffled their starting lineup a lot, but part of the reason for that is because they've got a lot of players that are capable of being starters, which means you've got options on the bench each week, and that's working out fairly nicely for them. That was on display whenever Maine's coming in and sparking a few things, but it's a little bit annoying that they lost that game, but they had been in good form, and this was a continuation of that good form because they don't normally do anything other than get thrashed by Melbourne City, so that was cool. Rebecca Stott, immense at the back for Melbourne City, and they made about 1 million passes throughout that game, just getting everything rolling for them. So yeah, it's a little bit pesky for the Phoenix women, but still the type of close defeat that suggests that this is like this. The cart's not being upturned or anything like that. They're just going to continue on the way they've been going, and hopefully they'll win the next one. What's going on in the wider world? We mentioned Tyler Bindon a little bit. He's definitely on transfer watch when the new year kicks in. There's a couple of players that that could apply to, but I think he's front and center because that whatever transfer that goes down there might also be quite a significant one. I mean, this championship club's being linked with him at the moment. It's not out of the question he might even get a Premier League deal. I don't think he'd necessarily play. I think that might be the best case scenario for Reading would be if he goes to a Premier League club and they loan him back to Reading for the rest of the season would probably be their ideal situation that they'd like to work on. I don't necessarily think that'll happen quickly either. That might be a few weeks. And I talked about the bicycle kick maybe being the last thing he does for Reading, but if you've got a bunch of bidders, you want them to keep bidding. You want them to drive each other up, especially when the money is the whole purpose of the sale because your club is absolutely broke. Well, driving the biggest bargain you can makes sense. So that might take a few weeks to go down, if indeed it does. Who knows? Maybe they might decide he's too important and we'll sell him later. But we gotta hang on to this dude. But Chris Wood, Nottingham Forest, scored a goal this morning, got an assist as well. His first assist of the season. He's not really been well. It makes sense why he wouldn't be. Like, they've built a team around trying to get him goals, so of course he's not going to be out there setting up goals. He's supposed to be at the end of all the moves. There's nothing that happens after the end of the move other than walking back to halfway to let the other team kick off because he just scored. Nicely taken goal, a little bit of head tennis with, I think it might have been Anthony Alanga, and then just whips it over the top. But yeah, clever pass as well, feeding in field for Morgan Gibbs-White to get their second goal. They won 2-0 against Everton. Nottingham Forest have won 5 games in a row. The last couple of them didn't involve a lot of Chris Wood. It was sort of, 1-0, 2-0 wins where he was a little bit more on the periphery, but other guys stepped up to provide goals when they needed him. This one against Everton was a little bit more, this was Chris Wood's party. The goal and the assist and the 2-0 win, that's how it goes. Against his old mate, Sean Dyche, coaching for Everton as well. A couple of his ex-Burnley teammates around that Everton squad. I can't remember who played, but 5 wins in a row. This is mid-round. There'll be some more games tomorrow morning, but at the time of recording, Nottingham Forest is sitting second. They might drop back to fourth at the end if Arsenal win, if Chelsea win. Fine. Okay, Nottingham Forest are fourth in the New Year's then at the exact midway stage of the season because I think they played 19 games, which, yeah, literally the exact midway point of the season. Nottingham Forest could, maybe even should make European football off the back of this. Nottingham Forest could qualify for the Champions League if they don't slow down. Like some of the, you sort of think a couple of the traditional top 6 teams, just Manchester United aren't doing very well. Spurs are up and down. Manchester City won this morning, but have been on a complete. I don't even know what's going on with them. There's some vulnerability there in those top 4 spots, and Nottingham Forest have been playing fantastic football. They're an extremely good defensive team. They're very well organized, very well coached. They know exactly how they want to play. They know how they want to break down teams. They're consistently able to break down teams because Chris Wood's now got 11 goals this season. And they're just playing fantastic footy, and we're halfway through a season at this point. At this point, you're actually allowed to start thinking about where teams are on the table and how they might finish up because they've put themselves in a fantastic, just an amazing position. And if they can carry this on, I mean, Chris Wood in the Champions League, who knows? It's still not likely, but they've given themselves a chance.
The Blackcaps won the first T20 versus Sri Lanka, and we've got the Super Smash underway. It's really trying to get underway, but the old rain has interrupted proceedings. But we'll get to the Super Smash in a jiffy because we've got a bit of Blackcaps to talk about. Big comeback victory in the first T20, and they are playing again tonight. Monday night is the second T20, and then we are back on the 2nd of January for the third T20. My first observation, though, is that we are consistently told across sports that the big names got to play. The big names got to play so the fans show up. And we are told in various ways that there is a direct correlation between the superstars, the big name players playing and fans showing up. Who's a superstar in this Blackcaps team?
Kane Williamson?
Well, he's not there.
I'm not going to say Devon Conway. You're going to trick me into that. But
Well, none of these dudes are
Trent
playing.
Bolt, Tim Southey,
None of these dudes are
Tom
playing.
Latham.
What are you doing? They're not playing the T20s.
Yeah, this is what we're. Is this not what you're asking? Is they've not got superstars?
Yeah,
Hold on,
sorry.
you've got me on the wrong track. I'm confused. I thought you were saying like name some players so you can say that they're not playing, so you can point out that the crowd still turned up.
Well, that's my point. But I'm saying, who is the superstar that is playing for the Blackcaps right
Oh,
now?
sorry,
Is
that's where I misheard you. Who is the superstar in this team?
like
Daryl Mitchell.
there's some good players, but there's no superstar. There is some recognizable names, but my point is that there is no relationship between the best players playing and Kiwi cricket fans showing up. And this goes into the theme I've seen across Kiwi cricket for years now, is that Kiwis just love cricket, and Kiwis are going to show up in big numbers to watch New Zealand play cricket. We had a monster crowd for the first T20. I suspect there's going to be another monster crowd back again at the same stadium in case those folks in the Bay of Plenty region, and of course the wider vicinity of the North Island who converge on the Bay of Plenty region at this time of year, they're showing up in big numbers, and then they're saying that the game in Nelson on the 2nd of January at Saxton Oval is a sellout. So we've got sold out T20 games. Now, I don't want to use the sold out term because that's a bit of a gimmick at this point. We've got massive heaving crowds for T20s in which, I mean, it's Tim Robinson, Ravindra, Chapman, Phillips, Mitchell, Hay, Bracewell, Santner, Folks, Henry, Duffy. Like, there's certified Blackcaps in that group, but none of the big names that everyone tells us have to play for fans to show up. So I'm pondering, like, first of all, it's a reinforcement of the idea that Kiwis love cricket, and regardless of who they're playing, because of course, when England come to New Zealand, when Australia comes to New Zealand, the test crowds, oh my gosh, we got first 3 days are sold out, banger. On the back of the momentum generated by the World Cup and all this stuff, we got big crowds. Okay, here we are. Festive period. We don't have many big names in the Blackcaps T20 team. They're playing Sri Lanka, who most of the fans, aside from the Sri Lankan fans, most of the Kiwi cricket fans at Bay Oval, they might not know who Bumrah Fernando is. Like, Sri Lanka's not a massive draw card in the general cricketing perspective, or should I say the small 3 cricketing perspective. But despite New Zealand having an emerging development type of squad, despite the Blackcaps playing against Sri Lanka, there was a massive heaving crowd at Bay Oval. And I suspect there's going to be another massive heaving crowd today at Bay Oval. And then I suspect once again, when they play the third T20, which may not even matter because New Zealand might win it. And if they do, that will only reinforce this whole point further. There's going to be another massive heaving crowd in Nelson. So we need to stash this away that Kiwis are just showing up for cricket. Doesn't matter the format, doesn't matter the opposition, doesn't even matter who is playing for the Blackcaps. Kiwis are showing out in massive numbers just to watch cricket. And then from there, I'm going to also throw out this idea that there's maybe not necessarily a massive correlation between fans showing out in New Zealand and the quality of players who are playing for New Zealand. Anyway, the Blackcaps won the game. It was a seesawing affair. Daryl Mitchell got a big old score. Michael Bracewell got a big old score. Sri Lankan openers got a big old score. And then no one else scored over 10 runs. So that's how the Blackcaps won. We've got Matt Henry taking a few wickets. Jacob Duffy taking a few wickets. And Zach Folks taking a few wickets. Which do you have a hot point or a question that you want to throw out there to get us started?
Hot points, perhaps, because I think the batting innings from the Blackcaps was Well, it started off not so good. I think your top row, the top four, no one scored above 15, and then Mitch Hay uh, got a gold duck, who I think has scored 3 runs in 3 innings so far in international cricket, but has took a couple nice catches. So the glove work's been good. His time will come, but big partnership between Mitchell and Bracewell. However, that's just those are like two. I was going to say most experienced. They might well be the most experienced guys if you look at it sort of like their overall career thing in terms of batters in that 11. So that's just the value of having a deep batting lineup, I think, is their top order was able to fail because the middle order could then score a bunch of runs. Mitchell was great, Bracewell was great. We've seen this before from them. I think the bowling lineup was where the bowling performance was where it got quite interesting because Sri Lanka did get on top, and then the Blackcaps had to fight it back a little bit. You had Matt Henry being awesome. That's one point. You had Jacob Duffy with a big over that changed the course of the game, took a few wickets and really flipped the momentum on its head. That's another point. And then the other point I thought was quite interesting was that they really banked on Zach Folks there, young in his career, to be the death bowler, to be the guy bowling those key ones at the very end. And I think a couple balls got away from him, but for the most part, I thought he did that role pretty well as well. So there was a nice tidy effort, and then throughout that, similar to the things of like Daryl Mitchell scoring runs, Michael Bracewell scoring runs, seen it before, just like we've seen Mitchell Santner tying up an end through the middle overs before many times, and he was again excellent at that, slowing them down just enough to allow the pace bowlers to strike with a little bit of pressure there. And yeah, good comeback victory there. It looked like it wasn't going to happen, and then suddenly it's just one of those ones where a T20 game can change so suddenly, and that happened. And they were talking to, which by the way, I hate this when they go to talk to the players during the game on the little microphone. They had it with Glenn Phillips in this one. It's always Glenn Phillips as well. I guess he's a good interview, but it's like let him focus on the game. But he said multiple times where he's like, well, I can't remember what the word was. He's like, we're fighters or we're scrappers or something like that. And he basically forecast how the game was going to end. So they were behind at that stage. It was looking struggling. And then there's your best fielder out there talking about how, who seemed to be getting a little bit of itchy feet because he wasn't getting a bowl, but he also explained why he understands why he wasn't getting a bowl, which was pretty clear from how that team was selected. But yeah, talking about how this is a team that's going to fight till the end, and they did, and there was just enough time for them to scrape through with an 8-run victory. So it was some nice stuff there, some good stuff in there, but also a good variety of performances within that victory as well.
A lot of cricket broadcasting observations happening now because we got the Blackcaps and we got Super Smash, and I find it insane how, especially in the Super Smash, but it happens in the Blackcaps a few times, they go to a player on the mic and the commentators just talk the whole time. Like the whole
Yeah, and half
point
the
of this,
time they're not even talking about the game, like they're not even commentating.
the whole point of this segment is a mic'd up player segment where the player talks. But what happens is the broadcaster, the commentator, talks a lot, talks 70% of the time, and then they throw it to the player as the bowler is running into the crease. And it just seems like an absolute waste of time. But there's a lot of those things happening for the Kiwi cricketing broadcaster. Zach Folks, currently averaging 22.5 in T20 bowling, got a T20 bowling average of 18.4. Sorry, that's a 22.5 in internationals. T20s, he's averaging 18.4. Zach Folks, who has bowled in 4 formats, 2 T20 formats, first class and list A. His worst format is first class, where he's averaging 25.7, which all matches up pretty nicely with Will O'Rourke. Will O'Rourke, T20 international bowling average of 21.2, T20 bowling average of 23.1, and his worst bowling formats are test bowling, 24.8 average, and first class bowling, 26. This is an insight into the simmering talent that Aotearoa is brewing in the, especially, well, I'll say both pipelines for the Blackcaps and the White Ferns. There's a second T20 playing tonight, so I don't really have a lot more to say. We'll keep building the observations and let things flow on. I'm just lost for words there. I will say Daryl Mitchell, 162 strike rate this year. So the only players with a higher T20 strike rate than Daryl Mitchell, Tom Blundell, 168, and Fenelon, 167. The fourth highest T20 batting strike rate this year is the one and only Zach Foulkes, 142. They are the only Blackcaps over 130. So shout out to them. We got Matt Henry, fantastic in T20 international bowling at the moment. This year, 21.8 average. And of course, Zach Foulkes made his debut this year, so his average is the 22.5. But this flows us into Super Smash, where I was actually a bit annoyed because the old Otago Volts were in a very strong position yesterday against Auckland, and then their game got rained off. Otago had restricted Auckland to 106, I think that was off 17 overs at 6.5 RPOs, 106 all out, and then Otago with 26 without loss, scoring at 14.1 RPO. So Otago were well on top of that game. But my first major Super Smash thing is Kyle Jamieson coming back, moving the ball both ways. I think he had a hoop and in-swinger to get someone out. And then let me confirm this. So he got Dale Phillips out bowled. Dale Phillips, the right-hander, so the ball's going into Dale Phillips. And then he got Jamal Todd out first. But Jamal Todd's a lefty, and he bowled an in-swinger to the lefty. So he's moving the ball opposite directions. That is as good a return for Kyle Jamieson as you're going to get. Just showing how he can move the ball with his height, with his bounce, with his skill set. Like no one else in the Super Smash so far is moving the ball both ways. You've got swing bowlers. Like Mason Clarke has actually looked like he's had the most swing of a lot of bowlers who have played so far. Classic outswing. But Kyle Jamieson just came back into Super Smash and was moving the ball both ways, which was fantastic to see. And that was in the game where Canterbury lost to Otago. And that's the game where Max Chu just went absolutely crazy. 82 runs, strike rate of 178, batting 3. And that's a Max Chu who has 360 runs at an average of 60 in the Plunket Shield. He's got 157 runs at an average of 39, but with a strike rate of 103 in the Ford Trophy, and 82 runs at a strike rate of 178 in the Super Smash. So Max, like if you're worried about Mitch Hay, I mean we got another one. This is the thing about Kiwi cricketers. Yeah, sure, I'm like, all the youngsters in the Blackcaps, they're just getting the opportunities, they're just building, they're going to stack up the games, they're going to struggle, they're going to have good patches. This is young player development. But if you're stressing about Mitch Hay, which you shouldn't be, but if you are, well, we got another guy right there, Max Chu, who not only was promoted up the order, but he was captain for Otago, and he then was captain against Auckland as well, because I think Luke Georgeson is injured. So Max Chu has had a massive he's had a massive season, to be honest. If we're talking about best young cricketers, you got the, obvious ones. We got Reece Mariu in the Plunket Shield, who didn't play for Canterbury, and that's understandable given you got Chad Bowes, Tom Latham, and Matt Boyle hit a 50-odd against the touring Sri Lankan team. Bevan Jacobs just hit his 28 runs or whatever off the one over, and then they played another hit around of T20 cricket in which Matt Boyle scored a 50. So, and then I don't know if Canterbury is going to select Reece Mariu in the middle to lower order, especially when they got a lot of all-rounders. So I don't really see a place for Reece Madu in this Canterbury Super Smash team when Bowes and Latham are available. Matt Boyle is a better white ball batter than Reece Madu, which is my opinion, but when you consider that he's played all three formats, he's got a decent record in all three formats, and Reece Madu hasn't played Super Smash, does not have a good Ford Trophy record, I think all of that backs up the opinion that Matt Boyle is a better white ball batter. But when we're talking about impressive youngsters, like I think Max Chu is top of the pops right now for his run scoring in all three formats. Very efficient, effective wicketkeeper, but he's also stepping up as a leader for Otago, and that's a key wrinkle there. We've had 2 games from Otago, a win against Canterbury, then a no result. Northern Districts and Auckland was rained off on the first game day, and then Auckland and Otago was rained off yesterday. So that is all the stuff on the men's side of the Super Smash. There are a couple of new players for Otago. Jamal Todd looks like a frisky hitter up the top of the order, lefty, as I was saying. And who else do we have for Otago? Ruben Clinton, who I think is a South African who has played for USA. No, he's born in Fort Worth, Texas, so he might just be straight up American. Bit of off-spin, didn't see him bat, but he looks like a frisky cricketer. Batting in the middle to lower order for Otago, took a wicket. I think it was a big wicket. Yeah, he got Guptill out. So that's not too shabby for Mr. I don't want to offend him by saying Mr. Clinton, President Clinton, but he's the Ruben Clinton.
Any relation?
So shout out to him. He's playing for Otago. Obviously, we mentioned Mason Clarke before as well. Someone who I've I don't know if he was playing I don't know if he was playing Plunkett Shield leading up to Super Smash, but someone who was straight in there in the Auckland team for their first Super Smash game proper. Yeah, Jock McKenzie hasn't played Plunkett Shield, but he was batting 5, and I'm pretty confident he would have had a bowl for Auckland as well. I don't want to say Jock McKenzie's better than any other youngster, but he's in the mix for the highly talented young players in New Zealand. Like, he is a very good cricketer. But I don't know if he's better.
Is he better than Angus McKenzie?
Angus McKenzie does the job for Canterbury.
Which one's which, by the way? Because for obvious reasons, get them confused.
Well, you just differentiated them right there. Is he better than Angus McKenzie?
Yeah, but what I'm talking are they both all-rounders?
They're both all-rounders. One plays for Auckland, one plays for Canterbury. That's all you need to know, really.
And which one's the rugby player?
I'm sure they both played rugby at some point,
Probably, but one of them...
Who cares? Jock McKenzie's awesome, but Angus McKenzie's really good for Canterbury as well. Like, there's games where he might not bowl, but he's batting down the order and he's fielding. And for all the talent that Canterbury has, Angus McKenzie and then someone like Michael Ray, but I think Angus McKenzie is a better all-round cricketer than Michael Ray. For all the talent that Canterbury has, Angus McKenzie is just always in the team. And I think that he's always in the team because he is a very good fielder. He's a very good bowler. He's not very good, but he's a good batter as well. If we're forecasting potential, I think Jock has more Blackcaps upside and potential, but Angus McKenzie, A, he's always selected. B, he always does the job. And I think he's pretty good. So I don't want to say that Jock McKenzie's better. But Jock McKenzie, again, I don't want to say Jock McKenzie's better than Will Clark. I don't want to say Jock McKenzie, as far as all-rounders go, I don't know if Jock McKenzie's better than Luke Georgeson. Don't know if he's better than Muhammad Abbas. Christian Clark's pretty impressive as an all-rounder as well. Point is, There's one of those dudes in every team, and they're all 25 years or younger-ish, and they're all very good at cricket, so there should be no concerns about New Zealand's cricketing depth, as we've discussed with the young phenoms. But Jock McKenzie hasn't shown his best cricket. He does have a couple of 50s, first class 50, one day 50. He's got a few wickets in all three formats. And he was batting number 5 for Auckland, so I think he might be someone to watch out for with the expanded role for Auckland. Any other comments, questions, queries for the men's Super Smash?
Well, you got 2/3 of the way towards the dream trio of Cole Jamieson, Henry Shipley, and Will O'Rourke, because Henry Shipley also came back and played for Canterbury in their first game. I think Will O'Rourke in the... Yeah, he's playing ODIs for the Blackcaps, so we might not get that this year. But, at least they're all back. All three of the tall fellas for Canterbury are back playing cricket again and bowling overs and looking pretty good. Shipley wasn't as dramatic as Carl Jamieson swinging the ball both ways in his first game back, but he was solid. There's all good signs.
Carl Jamieson took the 2 wickets, Shipley took 1 wicket, and then Shipley 13 not out, and Carl Jamieson 2. He was bowled by Hazeldine. Hazeldine, if you're looking for just like the most fun Super Smash cricketers, Brett Hampton, number 1. Somewhere on the list, Andrew Hazeldine. Bowling fast lefties. It's a bit wild, it's a bit out of control, but he bowls heat. And it's not like Martin Guptill wasn't stepping forward and doing his classical shots to Andrew Hazeldine. He's kind of up on his toes, jumping around. And I think Andrew Hazeldine's got a bit of X factor, and he's I think there's like Super Smash legend type of stuff there if he can maintain it over the course of a season. But I think my main Super Smash legend right now is still Brett Hampton. Women's Super Smash. So obviously we've had a bunch of games in Alexandra for Otago, and Otago are playing Central Districts on Tuesday. So another game day in Alexandra. The 3 games that were played, we had a no result versus Northern Districts and Auckland. Then Canterbury defeated Otago, and then Otago defeated Auckland. So Canterbury women defeating Otago Sparks was an upset. And Otago men defeating Canterbury men, I believe, was an upset, because the 2 teams, so in that Otago versus Canterbury game day, which is the only full game day we've had so far, the teams that lost had at least, I think, 3 White Ferns or Blackcaps, and their opposition had no White Ferns or Blackcaps current players. So that tells you about the matchups there, and the Canterbury women did pretty well to win their game against Otago, led by Indian professional Shikha Pandey. She was 63 runs down the order, and she then took 2 wickets at 4.2 RPO. But I was also impressed with Missy Banks chiming in. Classic T20 chiming in innings. 14 not out, strike rate of 140 down the order, and then 2 wickets at 4.7 RPO, and she dismissed Bella James and Polly Ingalls. So I enjoyed that little contribution from Missy Banks. Not quite as much as I enjoyed Bree Illing, especially against Northern Districts on the first game day. She is a big, tall lefty, 2 wickets at 5.6 RPO. What did she do in the loss to Auckland? No wickets at 7.3 RPO. But Bree Illing, A, she's a lefty. B, she bowls with the similar pace and bounce as the Penfold sisters. And I am curious if Josie Penfold bowls faster than Molly Penfold. Because Josie Penfold bowls with a bit of pace and bounce. I think she hit someone in the helmet yesterday. And there's that trio of seamers for Auckland who are all fairly similar. And they get a little bit of swing, a little bit of seam, but they are pace and bounce. You got Illing, the lefty, Molly Penfold's the white fern, and then Josie Penfold is the undercover player who actually has the best T20 record of the three prior to this game. So this is after the first game day. Molly Penfold was averaging 36.6 in T20 and Super Smash. Bree Illing averaging 31.5. Josie Penfold averaging 15.7. So I am curious there, but Bree Illing has the X factor. She's a lefty. She bowls pretty quick, good bounce, good swing as well for a lefty. So watch out for Bree Illing. But we've had 2 game days for Otago, which gives us a nice sample size of Otago Sparks. And Eden Carson's had a fantastic start to the tournament. 5 wickets at 5.7 RPO in 8 overs. Emma Black's bowling pretty well, big in swinger. She's been one of the best seamers in New Zealand for the last 4 to 5 seasons. So watch out for her. Susie Bates goes without saying. She usually scores runs at this level. But as per Otago's hot start to the HBJ Shield, where I think they finished the first stanza undefeated. I did write about it after the first couple of weekends. You got Polly Ingalls, 58 runs in 2 games. Caitlin Blakely had a nice knock, 21 not out, and Bella James. Now, Bella James went up to the White Ferns, and she hasn't necessarily done a big, 50-plus banger century as she did in the HBJ Shield to get into the White Ferns. But her last 10 games, they look like this. 63, 36, 101 not out, 46, 47 not out. So those are her first 5 games of the last 10 games. Then her final game of HBJ Shield, she scored a 0. White Ferns against Australia, 27-24. And Super Smash so far, she has scores of 4 and 20. That suggests Bella James has hit a plateau. Now, that's not surprising considering that's usually what happens for the White Ferns players. You get called up to the White Ferns as a batter, you're probably going to get worse. But Bella James is scoring efficiently. In the Rose Bowl, she had the highest strike rate of the batters who scored 30 runs or more. Maddie Green had 85.5 strike rate. Bella James was 82.2. They were the only players to score 10 runs with strike rates over 80. And that applies for the whole year of ODI batting as well, where most White Ferns batters were below 80 strike rates, and there were only 4 ODI batters this year who had strike rates over 80. Bella James went straight into that group. We go to the Super Smash, and Bella James has the highest strike rate for Otago. She's only got 24 runs, so she's tied for 4th in runs for Otago, but she has a strike rate of 133.3. And the other 4 players who have hit 20-plus runs, Ingalls is at 107.4, Susie Bates is at 107.4. They're the only ones over 100. So my point here is that Bella James, her runs have dropped a little bit compared to her epic form in HBJ Shield, but she scores quickly. And this is what White Ferns cricket needs. Because Bella James is playing the same strokes. Like, she was smashing Molly Penfold. Same way she was smashing the Australian bowlers. Yes, she gets out, but in the in her period batting, she looks like the most confident, aggressive, powerful batter that the White Ferns have, aside from someone like Sophie Devine. So Bella James, her runs aren't quite there. She isn't scoring the big runs. But for New Zealand, she was scoring quickly against Australia. And in a strong Otago batting unit, she's scoring quickly. Like Bella James, if she hits 30 off 15, 20 off 10, 25 off 15, whatever it is, with a good strike rate, well, she's got Suzie Bates right there. Caitlin Blakely is a very solid domestic batter. Felicity Robertson's a very solid domestic batter. Polly Ingles, I reckon she should be the White Ferns wicketkeeper. So that talks a lot about her batting ability. So again, the point that I'm trying to get out here is that Bella James is playing her role nicely. And I think that's important for her, considering what she offers is something that the women's cricket pipeline in New Zealand doesn't quite have a lot of right now.
Right on. And so we actually haven't seen some of the teams play yet, right? It's not just the rain which has stopped some of these games being finished. I don't think is it CD had Northern Districts have a women's game either?
First game day was Northern Districts versus Auckland. Next game day is Otago hosting Central District. So the team we haven't seen or that won't play is Wellington. So we haven't seen Wellington. We probably won't see Wellington for a couple of days. Obviously, concentration of cricket in Alexandria means we've got a heavy dose of Otago. So that's a good opportunity to put the spotlight on Otago, where Max Chu is in dominant form across all three formats. And we had 17-year-old Mason Clarke made his debut, amongst other interesting little Otago men wrinkles. Otago woman, dominant team in HBJ Shield. Coming into Super Smash, we got Bella James stepping up to the White Ferns, bit of funk there. Eden Carson's in great form. And you've got, Polly Ingles and Suzie Bates, or Polly Ingles pushing for White Ferns cricket. There's a lot of interesting storylines for Otago that I want to update as well after the Central Districts game day, because 3 games for Otago, nice little spotlight on them, but also we'll see how they progress after games against Central Districts, because the Otago women only have 1 win from these 2 games. And the Otago men, both teams should have more wins. Otago women probably should have beaten Canterbury. They were in a strong position throughout that game. And the Otago men should have got a win against Auckland, but I think the rain interrupted that one.
Yeah, and we will have, so Otago Central doubleheader on Tuesday, Northern Wellington doubleheader on Wednesday. Thursday is a Blackcaps game, third T20. Just as tonight is the second T20, then it's Auckland, Canterbury, Central, Wellington. So it seems they've set up the calendar quite nicely, where it's you either get 2 games of Super Smash on a day, or you get a Blackcaps game. Like none of them are clash, none of them are overlapping. That's cool, especially after a Saturday night in the A-League where you had the Auckland FC game and the Phoenix women were on at the same time, Phoenix men on directly before that, and Blackcaps overlapping. Not the Phoenix men game, but did overlap the other ones as well. So there was trying to follow all this football stuff, and it's all happening at the same time, but the cricket's nice and spread out.
You want to touch on the Breakers quickly, who I think had a Christmas Day loss and a bit of a kerfuffle, which is behind you there. And I see old bigger Ruben Tarangi about to get rushed by Parker Jackson. We've had a few Kiwis in the NBL scraps, because Shea Ili was involved in a bit of a ruckus earlier in the season. Now it looks like Ruben Tarangi was getting amongst it. I was
Low in the same one as Shea Ili. Both of them were involved in that one.
And it would be rude for me to forget Tim Paine rushing in when someone kicked the ball at Paulo Retre after the whistle. And Tim Paine comes in, rushes in, gives a little chest bump, as ruckus as a football game can get. So that was part of the view that I was building about Tim Paine. because that came in later in the game and he just rushed in. It was like backing up his boy who just got slammed in the leg by a kick. So shout out Tim Paine. Shout out Ruben Tarangi. Less shout outs to the New Zealand Breakers who suck. I apparently you've got something else to say about the Breakers, so go ahead.
I do, because when you've lost 8 games in a row, there's not a lot there drawing people's attention to make them want to watch them. But I got to tell folks that the next game, which is tomorrow, they're playing against the Cairns Taipans on New Year's Eve. This one's worth a little bit of a geese, not only because the Breakers are trying to snap an 8-game losing streak. They were 7-3. They're now 7-11 and absolutely capitulating. But they don't actually have the worst losing streak in the NBL because the Cairns Taipans were 3-1. Now they're 3-15. So they've lost 14 games in a row, which means that between these two teams on New Year's Eve to see in the new year, you've got a combined 22 consecutive defeats in the Australian National Basketball League, which surely is a record. Like, that's incredible that two teams could be as inept as that at the same time, and only one of them can lose this game. You know, someone has to win, someone's streak has to come to an end. And ordinarily you'd say, well, at least the Breakers have shown something, but they haven't shown much lately. And they're going to be without their star player because, yes, that kerfuffle with Parker Jackson-Cartwright, which involved him trying to fight Ruben Tarangi, which if Tim Paine was trying to fight Ruben Tarangi, I would say, okay, that's a fair fight. Like, that's a I don't think it's quite heavyweight duel because neither of them are huge, but
if Tim Paine was trying to fight Ruben Tarangi or vice versa, I'd say chill out. We don't need to fight, lads.
that's true. That's the right response. We don't want to see the we don't need to see the damage of that. We need to protect both those fellas. But
Well,
frankly,
no,
they can protect each other.
nothing to do with the violence that would ensue. I just don't want to see those lads fighting each other. Like, there's no reason. Like, two heroes of Kiwi sport, there's no need to fight. Like, we can sort any disagreements out in a more peaceful way by doing more peaceful activities, heal the wounds and move forward. But if it's an American versus Ruben Tarangi or Tim Paine versus some Aussie, oh, happy days, go at it. But I'm not here for any Kiwi on Kiwi battles to that degree, especially involving two heroes of Kiwi sport.
Which is part of what happened with the Rob Lowe and Shea Illy versus Montrez Harrell one back earlier in the season, is that you had a couple Kiwi lads backing each other up in that one, which was very cool. I only throw this out hypothetically to paint a contrast between Ruben Tarangi holding his ground with Parker Jackson-Cartwright rushing at him. It's not the same thing, you know. It's if Tim Paine's rushing at you versus if Parker Jackson-Cartwright's rushing at you, because what happens is PJC shoves the referee out of the way and amidst the red mist. Has now got a 5-game suspension for that. I mean, he wasn't even ejected in the game, which is madness, because how do you push a referee over and not get at least ejected in the game? But whatever. I think the referee actually backed him up and was like, nah, I put myself in that situation. Like, yeah, but you're a referee. He still shouldn't be shoving you. You shouldn't be getting the arm extension out there. That's madness. And regardless of who he's shoving over, terrible look for the Breakers when your best player is losing his cool so drastically like that. Like, that's not leadership. But he shoves one referee over. He's now got a 5-game suspension, which major factor in that game against Cairns. Now, Breakers don't have their best player. They've lost 8 games in a row. Now their best player is missing. They really don't look like they have much ability to create offense without him. So this is going to be an incredible coaching achievement from Coach Kopp if he's going to figure something out there. But if you watch the rest of the video, PJC shoves one ref over, rushes up to try get at Ruben Tarangi, who just stands there. He might as well be laughing at him. He just stands there looking at him like he doesn't even react. It's not even stone face. He's just looking at him like nothing's happening. Then another referee walks in and picks up PJC and drags him away. And it reminded me a lot of when Steven Adams did that to Tony Bradley, I think it was, against the Chicago Bulls a couple of years ago, where there's someone's trying to get at Ja Morant. Adams walks over, hooks around, like bear hugs him, just lifts him up and carries him off. And everyone was laughing about that at the time. Like, it was a big, great viral moment. It's how hilarious that was. Adams just picked up another player. But Stephen Adams is renowned as one of the strongest, toughest men in the NBA. PJC got picked up by a referee and carried out of there. Like, a referee, it's oh man, there's so many bad visuals about that instance for the Breakers, and that might have been the worst one of them, is that the guy who's trying to fight a fella who was very clearly out of his like Ruben Turangi is a peaceful man. He wasn't going to throw punches or anything like that. But if he needed to, he could have. That wasn't a fair fight to where he was in any way, shape, or form intimidated. He was not. You can see that pretty clearly on his face. He was not intimidated. You can even see that in his body language over my shoulder there. He's, the drooping shoulders himself. He's not tensed up. He's not prepped for anything. He sees no forthcoming danger from a fellow who then got carried out of the danger zone by a referee. So a lot of bad visuals there for the Breakers. There's no doubt going to be more bad visuals when they play against the Cairns Taipans. Someone's losing streak has to end. Will it be the Breakers? Will it be Cairns? Well, Cairns do have Sam Meninga. Not Sam Meninga. Breakers have Sam Meninga, who used to play for Cairns. Cairns still, however, have Sam Wardenberg, who is the highest scoring New Zealander in the NBL this season. I think he's getting 14.8 points per game. I'll check a little bit in the newsletter about this, but I think the four top scoring New Zealanders in the NBL this season are all big men. Sam Meninga is one of them. He's trending downwards, unfortunately, because his spot in the rotation has gotten quite weird on account of everything having to shift to fit in Taco Fall, who, by the way, is putting up some nice numbers. Taco Fall's starting to get around that sort of 11, 12 points, 8 rebounds kind of thing per game. That's nice. If you only look at the box score, and a lot of positive on-court stuff as well. If you only look at the box scores, it looks like Taco Fall's doing great. If you also look a little bit wider at the box scores, you'll notice that players who were playing very well earlier in the season, like Meninga, have all dipped off. Even PJC, you could say the same thing about to some extent. Everyone else has gotten worse so that Taco Fall can be competent in the NBL. So there's one of those ones where the stats don't necessarily tell you a full story, at least not on the surface level. But Sam Wardenberg missed a couple games with injury recently. He's come back. He's shooting some 3-pointers quite nicely. He's getting points on the board, and you might recall Rob Lowe found a whole bunch of form after playing the Breakers recently. So opposition big men do have a little bit of precedent there. Sam Wardenberg versus the Breakers trying to end Kansas' 14-game losing streak. I reckon there's a little bit of something in that matchup as well. So one way or another, I'm not expecting amazing basketball, but I am surprisingly excited to see how this game goes. And if the Breakers do lose it, I think we can probably check out on the rest of the season at that point. I don't think there's anything else to gain from what's going to happen after that, except maybe a few extra Carlin Davison minutes at some point. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, the team that's lost 8 in a row versus the team that's lost 14 in a row.
If you are interested in that blockbuster, it will be played on Tuesday, New Year's Eve, up in Cairns. Who cares? I did like.
Who cares comes afterwards. The who cares? The Breakers lose this, then it's who cares the rest of the way. But I'm going to give them one last chance. If they can't beat this team, then then we say who cares.
Well, I reached that moment while you were describing whatever Parker Jackson Cartwright was up to, because I was like, who cares? So you might be a bit slow on the who cares. I've already pulled the trigger and I'm definitely in the who cares basket. But when we care less about the Breakers, we care more about the Kiwis and the NBL. So I am interested to keep tracking that. And speaking of tracking that, let's just pull into the NBL standings. Melbourne still second, Illawarra no Kiwis first, Sydney third, and Tasmania fourth, and Perth fifth. Top of my head, we got Melbourne United. Regular listeners know this very well. Rob Lowe, Shea Illy, and Flynn Cameron. Sydney, we got Liafa. Tasmania, Vodanovic.
Tasmania, Ruben Tarangi.
Ruben, oh, yeah, sorry, yep. Ruben Tarangi, because you're describing Parker Jackson Cartwright, so I zoned out. Perth, bunch of Kiwis, Ty Webster, Hiram Harris, Dante Russo-Nance, and so on. So 4 out of the 5 best teams in the NBL have lots of Kiwis, and the one New Zealand team doesn't have many Kiwis, and they suck, and they got bad vibes all over them. Which brings us to Rugby League Corner, Kiwi-NRL Corner for our podcast. Just want to drop a couple of bits and bobs just to keep planting the seeds of the Kiwi-NRL 2025 season. I got 5 funky Kiwi-NRL juniors who I think are all they all played under 21s this year, and they all dabbled in no, not all of them. They all played under 21s, and I'm curious about all 5 stepping up to reserve grade if they haven't already next season. And of course, they're all Kiwi-NRL juniors who are with Australian teams, starting with Te Huranui Twiddle, Turanga Waiwai Jr. Talked a lot about him this summer. Fullback half, who I think hopefully Te Huranui Twiddle gets a starting fullback, maybe a starting number 6 spot in the Eels New South Wales Cup team. That's the best case scenario, and he can stay in that role consistently. Felix Fa'atili, Hornby Jr. from Christchurch. He is a big bopper. He's the biggest bopper of these 5, and he's probably the biggest bopper in the Kiwi-NRL juniors stepping up. I think he's going to be a consistent bench forward for the Newtown Jets, who are the Cronulla Sharks New South Wales Cup team. So watch out for Felix Fa'atili. I'm going to do 2 more players from Christchurch because that's a major theme of Kiwi-NRL juniors. We got Makaya Tafua, Linwood Jr. from Christchurch, who played 17 New South Wales Guppy 17 New South Wales Cup games for the Warriors this year, while still being Jersey Flegg under 21 eligible. Warriors recruited Sam Healy. They've also got Jacob Auloa, who's a bit younger. But I think Makaya Tafua, his defense and craft will see him be a consistent New South Wales Cup player for the Warriors this season. Maybe even playing more as a small forward, because I think he's got the small forward skill set, as well as being a pretty good dummy half. Casey Newton-Whare from Riccarton in Christchurch. He is with the Storm, and I am curious if he can step up to reserve grade, whether it is with North Sydney Bears in New South Wales or Sunshine Coast, maybe Brisbane Tigers up in Queensland. Reminder, the Storm have 3 affiliated reserve grade teams to the best of my knowledge, which seems rather useful. But Casey Newton-Whare played 22 games of under 21s this year, and he's had a few seasons, 2 full seasons with Melbourne Storm since he left Christchurch to go to Queensland, where he played for Burleigh. And since then, he's had 2 seasons with Melbourne. So if you're a big bopper developing in Melbourne and you're entering your 3rd or 4th season in the Melbourne Storm system, that's usually when good things happen. So watch out for Casey Newton-Whare, who's a pure middle forward. And then we got John Whinianga-Nofo, who was in the Dolphins system, and he played 6 games of under-19s this year, and he played 6 games of Queensland Cup. In Queensland, there's no under-21s. So it goes Mal Meninga, which is under-19s. Then there's just this black hole that I don't really understand, but the Queensland Rugby League, in their wisdom, decided to do it. So there's the black hole, which I imagine you just play local footy. Then from there, you step up to Queensland Cup. And John Whinianga-Nofo played under-19s and Queensland Cup. And in 5 of his 6 Queensland Cup games, he played 80 minutes as an under-19 player for Redcliffe. He can play in the halves, he could play at hooker, he could play off the bench, he can probably play a bit of centre. In fact, he had 3 starts at centre, 2 starts in the halves and 1 game on the bench in Queensland Cup. He's coming out of Auckland Grammar, been in the Dolphins system for a while. Like once Redcliffe Dolphins got their NRL bid sorted, I think it was Peter O'Sullivan recruited Whinianga Nofo to go to the Dolphins. So he's been in their system for a while. I expect him to be a consistent Queensland Cup player, and his utility value, I think, is going to be very useful in the NRL. And of these 5 players, I think Whinianga Nofo is the closest to an NRL debut, considering if you've got him on your bench, he's going to play any position you put him in there, so he's going to do a good job. One last thing I wanted to try out here. We'll build it out. This isn't like a definitive thing right here. I'm just trying to map out some Warriors youngsters where we have a game ranking system. So Warriors youngsters by the number of games they will play next year. 20 gamers, guys who I think can or will play 20 games. And 20 games in the NRL, it's pretty hard to do. Like, if you're playing at least 20 games in consistent NRL seasons, you're an absolute monster. Because your injuries, suspensions, off-field dramas, like there's all sorts of things pulling you out of consistent NRL footy. And 20 games is a good marker for someone who just keeps showing up. I think Ali Leotau is a 20 gamer. I think Tom Ale is a 20 gamer. And I think Dimitri Vaimunga is a 20 gamer. I also think Rocco Berry is a 20 gamer. And I also think Adam Pompey is a 20 gamer. So the interesting thing here is we've got Leotawa, Berry, and Pompey competing for 1, maybe 2 spots. And they're all 20 gamers, which will add to what I'm going to say in a bit. Ale and Vaimunga, they can be on the bench together, but they're also there's a chance they might take each other's games away from each other. But I think is like, yes, I believe Ale and Vaimunga can play 20 games each, which will be a pretty funky bench rotation if it is to happen, because you've got Tom Ale and Dimitri Vaimunga on the bench quite a lot next season, hopefully. 15 gamers. Jacob Laban and Leka Halasima. Nothing dramatic there. 10 gamers. Zion Mai'uu and Mawala Graham Taufa. Then we get into the debutant class, guys who might debut and will play less than 10 games if they do debut. Sam Healy, Tanistowers Smith, and Eddie Iramia Toiava. So we got Mawala Graham Taufa as a 10 gamer, but I don't see much opportunity for another outside back to make their debut. There are guys like Motu Pasikala, Sio Kali, who probably have the most NRL potential next season, but I do not believe they will make their debuts next season. Because you got Leotawa, you got Berry, you got Pompey, Ed Cossey's the backup wicketkeeper, but Leotawa can play wing. Adam Pompey can play wing. Like, there's so much depth there in that outside back group. There's not many youngsters pushing for NRL footy in the Warriors outside back department. Even below them, you've got Mawala Graham Taufa, who's already played a few games of NRL. And he can play centre or wing. So of these 4 outside backs that I've just named, Rocco Berry is the only specialist. He's a specialist centre. I mean, I saw Adam Pompey play edge forward in New South Wales Cup last year. I've seen Ali Leotawa play in the halves, wing, centre and fullback over the last 4 or 5 years. Mawala Graham Taufa, he's a centre winger. So there's lots of outside back depth there, and I don't see a lot of opportunities for young, new debutants. There's a chance you get Tanner Smith as a middle forward. Eddie Iramea's got that utility value that I think is going to be useful, but I don't think he's going to debut necessarily. And Sam Healy is the new dummy half from the Sharks, who I think he will start the season as the third choice dummy half behind Wade Egan and Freddie Lussick. And then you've got Micaiah Tafua, who I just talked about, behind him. And you've got Jacob Auloa behind him. So you've got plenty of dummy half depth. And then when you're looking at the forwards, Tom Ale, Dimitri Vaimunga, Jacob Laban, Leka Halasima, Zion Mai'uu, Tanner Smith, Eddie Iramia Toiava. That's 7 dudes right there who are competing for... Ale and Vaimunga are competing for bench spots right now. So everyone else is behind them and competing for the same spots. Laban and Halasima do have that edge forward value, but we have seen Dimitri Vaimunga play edge forward for the Warriors in New South Wales Cup and at the NRL level. But Laban and Halasima are definitely 15 gamers. It just depends. Laban, it will depend on injuries and suspensions because he's more of a pure edge forward, whereas Halasima, as we talked about at the start of the podcast, coming full circle, he can play nearly every position on the field.
Right on. Well, there's nothing I can add to that. You've laid out all the details. That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
I always hope for you, you might
got?
fire off something witty or just something sharp, and you just it never quite hit. But that's all right because I don't actually.
It's not always there, unfortunately.
Didn't actually tease you with anything, so that's good. Good podcast. We're here for you, chatting about Aotearoa sport. What was your favorite Kiwi sports thing from the past week? The first wave of the festive period.
To experience probably the Blackcaps comeback, but I'm about to dig into some of them flying Kiwis antics, and I think very much looking forward to what Tyler Bindon does in the future for reasons already discussed here, and the fact he scored a bicycle kick this morning. Admittedly, a bicycle kick from like a meter off the line. Very similar, actually, to the goal that Hideki Ashige scored for the Phoenix 2 games ago. I think his little overhead kick, which is like just nice opportunistic stuff, but also incredible technique and confidence to go for that. And for Hideki Ashige to do that as a talented, experienced, creative attacking player, that was amazing. For Tyler Bindon to do it as a 19-year-old centre back, that goes a step beyond. So we got a good one there.
I was actually thinking it's more similar to Ashige because they both did a bicycle kick, but it also felt similar to Zen Peineke and his back heel very close to the line. Like similar razzle dazzle from just like a straight up, like right in front of the goal. Nice, both centre backs, bit of flair, nice stuff in there. My favorite thing was Max Chu going nuts. Just fantastic boundary hitting from Max Chu, skipper of the Otago Volts in the Super Smash. And that is the Niche Cast for this week. We'll try and be back next week for another Niche Cast, and maybe we will return to a post-Christmas festive period flow, but we'll see how we go. Big up, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.